Looking forward to when you do make that announcement, my friend. That'll be a good time on the show. I'll give you the floor probably to start the show on that one.
Yeah.
But Inside Out 2, the long-awaited sequel to Pixar's movie Inside Out, which I remember vividly seeing in theaters back in 2015. I remember, and it didn't dawn on me. Catherine and I rewatched the first one last week before the new one came out, and I saw that movie early. They actually had an advanced screening thing for it at AMC, and I saw that movie early, and it was a packed house. It was packed. I think it was sold out, and I remember that movie just being inspiring to watch and seeing the reactions of people all like laughing consistently. Like that felt, I don't want to be hyperbolic, because I'm honestly one of the few people I think that liked Finding Dory more than Finding Nemo. I don't want to say maybe the last great theatrical Pixar movie was Inside Out, because Soul technically didn't get a Pixar or didn't get a theatrical release. So I want to say it was like the last, I would say, complete knockout from Pixar.
I
Inside
agree.
Out 2, though, there was reason to be a little bit trepidatious with this sequel, I guess, if for no other reason than Pete Docter, the director, who I've said for years is the creative genius behind Pixar. He really is. He's the chief creative officer. He's responsible for Up. He's responsible for Inside Out. He's responsible for, I think, some of the most emotionally affecting movies of the company, and also some of the most ingenious concepts of the movies. He's only a producer on Inside Out. He was the writer and co-director of the first movie, or the co-writer and director of the first movie. And it was fascinating to listen to him talk about the collaborative process of writing that screenplay, and his ideas and how it really took shape. This new one is directed by Kelsey Mann, and this is her directorial debut. The only thing that she's directed was this Monsters Inc. short, Party Central. That was the only thing that she's directed, which is one of the more
Hmm.
forgettable shorts that they've done. I'm not going to lie there. I can't remember even what it preceded. It might have preceded Inside Out, quite frankly. Now that I think about it, it might have preceded Inside Out. But first off, you can tell shit at Disney's bad. They don't even have shorts. They don't even have a short attached to this movie, which I
Okay,
thought
I
was
was
odd.
wondering if I was like, I know I adjust my time so that I skip the previews, but I'm like, shit, did I miss the short? I don't know.
You know what I hate to say, and it's because they're doing everything they can to bump up that catalog on their streaming service, but a lot of that stuff is now going to Disney Plus,
That's what I
or
think.
a lot of those concepts um like Forky, like he has a bunch of shorts on Disney Plus. So a lot of those concepts that were going to be eventually used for like a short film have turned into like mini series of like 4 minute shorts on Disney Plus, and they release a whole season of them at once for you to turn on and have your kid be entertained for about like 20 minutes or something.
They
Hmm.
haven't been especially memorable recently. Elementals last year, if you remember, was this really crappy up short, Carl's Date,
Yeah.
which I thought was a real bastardization way to do Up, and to make, like, after that movie and that beautiful movie, to then make it about the old man getting a date. I don't care if it was like 7 minutes long; it was still stupid. But Inside Out 2, though, really feels like an event unto itself. This is a movie, a high concept animated movie, a fantasy that really beams with color and life and imagination. And I think above all else, because it's not perfect, I don't think it's as good as the original Inside Out. Few movies are, but I think with this sequel, I think, even because I've seen some people be more significantly critical towards this thing, and I guess I would say this: it might not do things completely different from the first Inside Out. It's structurally very similar, but what it does really well is the hardest thing it probably could have done. It was its biggest challenge, was to communicate anxiety and the effects of anxiety to young children, and also make it relatable for adults. That's a hard thing to do. And I think this movie knocks it out of the park. I think the hardest thing this movie had on its plate, it accomplishes beautifully, and that's a big credit to the screenwriters Meg LeFauve and Dave Holstein, for what they were able to do, not only with creating a character of anxiety that was believable, villainous, but also likable in a way, understandable, And I also think I'll talk more about it later too, but I also believe that when it's all said and done, Maya Hawke does an outstanding job as Anxiety. I think is the voice. I think it's one of the best voice acting performances, if not the best that I've seen so far this year. That's how I'm setting the table for Inside Out 2. We'll go Dom and then Joe. General thoughts on Inside Out 2.
I very much enjoyed it, and I had no doubt that this would do well in theaters, critically, and at the box office, simply because this is the most millennial coded, emotionally, conscious movie. The original was too, and that's why it resonated so well. This is just an not to say making movies is easy, but this idea, it feels so damn easy to just churn out ideas and stories and plot lines, right? It's such a straightforward idea that it's like, no, you stick to this. This is a little girl growing up, and all the metaphors are just in her head, and it's all visual metaphor, right? That's it. That's literally mechanically what it is. And it's life lessons in emotional development. And that, goddamn, how many times has Pixar made us cry since its inception? This was very much built for that. Did I cry at this movie? No. There very strong emotional scenes, absolutely, and I appreciate them. And maybe this is just me getting older, right? But still, certainly, I very much appreciate it for continuing to honestly just make conscious these emotional concepts, such as, of course, anxiety, but other things too, such as staying true to your sense of self, and being conscious of the world around you, etc. But I'm just really glad that I'm just glad that Pixar was able to deliver something good. Because I'm definitely been at that stage now, and again, I'm older, right? So I'm not as into it with Pixar as I used to be, and I never will be, probably. And that's okay. But I'm definitely at that stage with Pixar. My relationship is like, okay, it's not a sure bet anymore. We're all a little bit nervous now. But and then and maybe that was always going to happen inevitably, but this is certainly something I very, very much enjoyed with all of these new characters, and we can get into some critiques of those new characters, or at least how the movie handles them. But for now, very, very happy about this movie.
Yeah, I think everybody was a little burned by Lightyear. I think everybody
Mhm.
was a little bit burned by Lightyear a couple of years ago.
That was the big one.
That movie still pisses me off. That movie, I
I mean,
think I
let me
like.
say,
That's probably their worst. It's probably their worst.
it made me so sad to see the reactions from it. I personally just chose not to see it because I didn't have the time, and I'm like, I guess I'm not gonna spend any time on this. So I can't judge it. I cannot judge it, but
I watched it on a flight home with
Yeah.
a couple of friends, and one of them was telling me, like, dude, I actually really enjoy that movie. Like, tell me what you think of it when it ends. And I just sit there and bite my tongue and be like, holy crap, man. And I'm like, this was bad.
I said I went back when I was writing my review Inside Out 2. I wanted to hyperlink my review of Lightyear because I briefly mentioned it in my review, and I went back and I love when I'm harsh when I go back, and one of my opening line of the review is Lightyear isn't a compelling origin story, nor is it good enough to be Andy's favorite movie.
That's brutal.
That thing sucked. Joe, what say you though about Inside Out, a good movie? Inside Out 2, a good movie.
So, when they announced that, Pixar, was gonna start doing more sequels based on their franchises, it made me a little scared. Because we've known Pixar since we've been growing up to just do original movie after original movie after original movie. Very rarely did we get a sequel. Hell, we had to wait a decade to get Toy Story 3. We didn't even think that was going to happen, honestly, at one point as kids. We were just like, all right, it's just Toy Story 1 and 2. We now are in a new age of Pixar where it's half of it is original movies and half of it is sequels. And lately, I would say, like, as we were going into college, like our age group right here, they started doing some sequels. They did Finding Dory. Steve, unfortunately, I'm not so hot on that movie. I'm sorry. I don't think it's as bad as everybody else makes it out to be sometimes. I think it's fine for what the movie is and everything. I do think Incredibles 2 is pretty solid. I wasn't crazy about Monsters University. and I never liked any of the Cars movies, so don't even get me started on 2 or 3. So there you go. So hearing that they were gonna double down and start doing more sequels, I was like, well, I mean, like honestly, the best sequels from you guys have just been really the Toy Story movies. Yeah, like some of the other ones, I'm like, they're good, they're really good. But it's like it made me concerned because the batting average was kind of like not that good, honestly. With Inside Out 2, I can safely say this. It is really good. It is definitely on that same level that I would put Incredibles 2, or even to like Steve's extent, Finding Dory, even how much he enjoys it and everything. Like, because those movies I still think are well liked. It's just there is like some fair criticism towards them that I've seen often online. For me, Inside Out 2 is definitely up there. Even in like the top 10 of Pixar movies, because I just think it's no, not top 10, like top 15. If I had to put it, like, it's on the better half of the Pixar movies, I would say. And it's mainly due to what Steve was saying. It took concepts that, are pretty deep, are pretty mature to teach a kid. And they not only made it entertaining for a kid to learn, they made it entertaining for us to learn as, young adults or even older adults. As I was saying,
who probably also need to see it as well. Who need to learn these concepts as well.
Who need to understand that, yes, anxiety is a real thing. It's so amazing to see Pixar is able to still do this. And Inside Out is like, I mean, that's just like even Don was saying, this is a setup for them to succeed, man. It's like, wow, okay, like, they're literally, Pixar is going to take the idea of emotions, make it at a level that anybody can understand because they're aiming it towards kids, and they're going to knock it out of the park because that's what, that they're so good at that. This brought me back as I was watching it, especially hitting those emotional beats. And I do have some criticisms towards this movie, but especially the emotional beats of this movie brought me back to thinking, now this is the classic Pixar I remember. Like, this is what, when I watched Soul, I was like, that's the Pixar I know. I loved Turning Red as well. It was one of my favorite movies that came out that year, but I will admit, like, it's not as good as some of the other Pixar movies. This, though, I was like, okay, this is more what I'm talking about. If they can keep doing this consistent thing, and if they want to make sequels and they could put this amount of level and detail into them, I'm down for that. And it really does, as we've been all saying now, it comes down to, the character of anxiety. I also agree. I think Maya Hawke does a fantastic job in this role. This is probably one of my favorite voice acting performances in any Pixar movie. I think she does incredible. And I think the character design of anxiety, I mean, the character designs for all of them, I thought were always great, even the original film. But these new emotions too, I really enjoyed them. The one thing I love about anxiety is that she's got like the frizzled hair, but also she has Muppet teeth compared to everybody else who has normal teeth, which just gives her that much more craziness look to her. And the way they animate her and everything, and how she like moves around, and how she is, faster than most of the other emotions is great. I love how embarrassment, funny enough, is the biggest emotion in the room. Like just kind of drawing more to that. It's all the animation in this movie, and all the little details they do, and little like jokes like stream of consciousness and sarcasm and many other things too. I thought like, hey, like these are like these are on the nose, but the way you're animating it, it's really creative, and I'm actually really enjoying this. Like, I'm having a lot of fun watching it. I can get into critiques later, but that's why I'll stop there on positives. But overall, yeah, man, I really had a good time with this movie.
Somebody joked and said Inside Out 3 is going to be revolving around Riley in college, and she's not going to be, Joy's going to completely disappear, and nobody's going to know if it's because she's depressed, she's on birth control, or it's the state of society.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
You said it during 2016.
I thought that was fun. I thought that was funny, but yeah, everybody remembers the core 5 of the original cast. There was joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust. Initially, Pete Docter said it was going to be joy and excitement, but then they realized that they were too similar, so they had to come up with another one. And it was the one of the producers who said, "Do disgust. You need like an as-if emotion." And that's how they came up with disgust. The new emotions are envy, voiced by Ayo Edebiri, who's having a hell of a run here the last couple of years.
Oh my God.
There's ennui, which I think is awesome that ennui is one of the emotions. And is like a disaffected French youth played by Adele Exarchopoulos. I butchered that name, but I said it confidently. Embarrassment is Paul Walter Hauser, even though he doesn't say too much. I think it's wonderful that Paul Walter Hauser is the voice of him.
He
And
really
then
is.
and then you have Anxiety, who's Maya Hawke. So those are your new characters. You have Lilimar too, who's the voice of Val Ortiz. This is a hockey player that Riley looks up to, a high school hockey player. Because the whole movie's set at a weekend hockey camp, which is when also coincides with Riley hitting puberty. Also, this is totally random and not even worth mentioning. When the fuck did she become blonde? That was the first thing I noticed having rewatched the original Inside Out. She was brunette in the original.
Maybe it was like a dirty blonde.
I thought it was a Dirty Blonde too.
Okay, I'm colorblind. I am colorblind after all. I am colorblind after all. Now the fear emotions running around in my head like, you colorblind son of a bitch. Anyway, though, no, I think the screenwriters here deserve a lion's weight of credit. Meg LaFavor and Dave Holstein, because they thoughtfully illustrate and personify these complex and often debilitating emotions, like anxiety. And you got to think the target audience is about Riley's age, younger and younger too. They're on the precipice, if they haven't already, of experiencing these kinds of feelings. And I think the position, the age of Riley was always interesting to me. She's 11 in the first Inside Out. That's an age you don't see a lot in movies. It's usually 10, it's 13, it's 15, it's 18. You don't get 11 very often. And 11's a weird fucking age. And then in this movie, she's 13, I believe. And so she's like right on the cusp. She's right, like just becoming a teenager, about to make that transition from middle school to high school, which is, as we remember, a fucking leap. You know, no matter who you are, it's a leap.
It's literally that summer between 8th grade and high school.
It really is. Like you get to high school, and as a freshman, everything is bigger. There's more kids oftentimes, it's just a different world. And I think that like taking place in that summer period was a really thoughtful thing.
I really feel oh, sorry, Dom.
No, go ahead.
I really feel like this is they're teeing this up to be the next Toy Story trilogy for them, honestly. I think that because there's a lot of similarities I can see. I'm not saying like they follow the same story beats. It's just that Riley is kind of like this new generation's like Andy, I think. This is like
I think so too.
Like they're gonna watch her grow up and everything, and there won't be that connection of like she knows, like Andy has the toys physically, so there is that connection there. And that every kid that when we were growing up, we had toys, we played with toys and everything, so we have that connection as well. So there is that bit of a missing link there between like the characters of the emotions and Riley.
Sure.
But I mean, damn, with both these sequels, they have sold me completely on how much these emotions really do care for Riley, man. That like both of like, I mean, that first one, yeah, I'll admit it made me cry. But this one, I didn't cry either. But man, I was emotionally, I felt the weight of it. It was like, okay, like I get if someone does tear up at this and everything, because it's heavy and what's happening, and it is beautiful how it all wraps up in the end. But like, I think they really do demonstrate very well like how much these emotions really truly care about Riley, and it just makes it really makes like watching Riley grow up and everything she's going through. It makes it that you're much more involved because the emotions care that much about her and all the changes that she's going through too.
The very, very minor spoiler, but there's a point in the story where Joy has a breakdown effectively.
Yeah.
And that it's a very down point of the movie. And at that point, that is likely to be one of the places where people will be, will may cry a little bit. Me in the theater, I was like, yep, I get it. Yeah.
Relatable.
100%. Yep.
And minor spoiler too, I think how it happens and how it builds is really the plot of the movie. Mm-hmm. What a brilliant illustration of a panic attack.
Yes, dude.
What a brilliant illustration of the mind during the panic attack scene. Like, I didn't cry during this movie either, but that scene and watching it build, and like just when it starts to come to a head and it's really like The whole mind is freaking out over here, and
Yeah.
anxiety's going nuts, and then it just overtakes the control board, like in the way that it does. I was profoundly moved by
Yeah.
that.
Well, and not
Because
even that, but like also cutting back to the real world, which like with this whole review, we've been focusing on everything happening inside of Riley, but like cutting back to the real world and actually watching Riley, like we're seeing what's playing out in her head, but seeing her like having the panic attack outside, it's like, yeah, no, that's what it looks like. Like it's that bad.
and just freeze.
Yeah.
And just like completely freeze too. What like is ultimately right now the biggest moment of her young adult life. Just absolutely brilliant stuff. When we come back though, what I want to tee up for you guys to talk about too is the messages of these Inside Out movies are really great. And again, having rewatched the original movie last week, I came away, even watching it, obviously I'm older now and everything. The movie nails both of these messages that it's trying to convey in a really big way.
Yeah.
And which is hard to do when you're dealing with emotions, and especially there's no real rubric for how they're doing it with these emotions. I want to tee that up for the discussion when we come back from a couple of minutes of our Zoom sponsored intermission. Enjoy some clip shows, or enjoy a nice clip reel that Joe has so thoughtfully put. Back and better than ever to Sleepless with Steve, live on this Wednesday evening. We're talking about emotions. We're getting in our feelings today with Inside Out 2. I wanted to tee up this going into this because we'll be getting into the closing thoughts here in just a few minutes. But I want to go into this briefly, though. The thing that's really brilliant about the original Inside Out, because it revolves around, if you remember, if you haven't seen it in a while, it revolves around joy and sadness accidentally getting exiled from Riley's mind. And then Riley kind of falls into like a depressive funk because she just moved to a brand new state. She goes from Minnesota to San Francisco. And basically, joy and sadness have to find a way to coexist, because the movie starts with Joy continuously trying to put sadness in a literal corner so that she doesn't disturb Riley. And the whole message of the original Inside Out movie is it's acceptable to feel any and all of those emotions, and how all those emotions can work together. And it comes together beautifully during the hockey game at the very end of the movie when Riley's going for a slap shot. She's skating down the ice, and anger's like, and like their emotions are talking in her head, and anger's like, you want a piece of me, tough guy? And then sadness goes, we're embarrassing ourselves in front of mom and dad. And then Joy goes, not for long, goal gets scored. Like it shows how all the emotions beautifully work together. The thing about this movie Inside Out 2 is that it does give anxiety the purpose of, if kept measured, can often lead to us being our best selves. One of the things that, like, it was like I think it was like in early college. I can't put a date and time when I learned this, but over time I grew to know this. As somebody who's like anxious, I've never had diagnosed anxiety or anything, but I'm just an anxious person. I get nervous. I get like wired, and I get kind of like, jittery, anxious. I started to accept my own nervousness a little bit better when I realized, like, I looked inward and I realized it was often tethered to me wanting to do a good job at something and not wanting to fail, whether it was in school, whether it's at work for a project or something like that. Like I do all these interviews and stuff. If you guys see them, I do all these interviews. I get nervous before every single one.
Yeah.
I get like nervous. I like sit in silence for about 10 minutes before I'm waiting for the phone to ring. I just sit in complete silence. I even turn the music down on the radio, and I just sit in silence because it's like it's focus. And that's kind of how I use that energy. And that's what this movie teaches, is really how anxiety, if kept measured, which is easier said than fucking done, believe you me, but it can often lead to us being our best selves. And I think these movies nail the themes.
Yes. In fact, I think what they do, anxiety is basically the main character in this movie, in my opinion. I really do think they are. Like, I think the idea of villainizing anxiety was going to be like what they were going to do here. And like, she is the antagonist in some way, but it's not like she's not doing anything really evil per se. She is trying to look out for Riley, and the stuff she's bringing up is like, hey, she's got a fair point and everything. But yeah, it's like what you're saying, she needs to be kept in check. It's
what we want out of every Marvel villain, right? It's like, just give me a good reason. Like, give me a reason to like why you're doing this.
And like, there are moments in the movie where it's like it shows the bad side of anxiety, like using your imagination against you is a scene that they demonstrate here, and I think they do it really well. But they also show the whole things of, hey, anxiety does play into actually make you a better person, and it's because it makes you anxious if you're going to fail and you're going to try and make yourself better. There are moments like when anxiety pulls up like all the scenarios, and she's like, hey, like, you know, if we want to get better, you know, we don't want to fail, so we have to get better at hockey, and we have to do this. It's the same thing of being anxious for a test. Okay, if I fail, the anxiety of if I fail this test, I'm going to fail the class. So in order to combat that, I should probably go and study. And anxiety is driving that whole thing of making you want to study. They do such a great job at conveying that throughout this whole movie. And it could have been totally easy just to be like, yeah, anxiety, isn't that such a bad emotion, guys, and everything? But no, to actually make it be like, it's good that this is actually part of your life and why it needs to be there, and teaching it to a kid's level, like, that's amazing, man.
I just like how the emotions also feel other emotions at times. And it just adds to the complexity, right? They're not technically one dimensional.
Yeah.
Some of these like side characters can be, certainly, but that's just, it serves the purpose of the plot, right?
Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine. One critique I would say of this movie that I do have is that it does run into the problem of like character explosion, like character bloat and float.
Yeah.
At times where it's like rapid fire going through these jokes sometimes. And I want to say that that's probably it drives the fine line between of expanding the world and bloat.
Yeah.
How do you balance those two? And I think it did a pretty decent job of doing that. Where it's like, okay, yeah, we went through a lot here in like half an hour so far, but you handled it pretty speedily. The metaphor here is already fairly not too deep if you think about it, for people in our age range and above. But that's okay. And that's all right, because the message here is really good, and it manages to drive home those points. It has the right points to make. Yeah. And I think it was fine at the end of the day, because you really just hone in on anxiety being the ringleader of the new emotions, and that's all right. Yeah.
A lot of the side characters are amusing. A lot of the side characters are amusing. The new emotions are mostly developed. I think if I had to really dig for one complaint, I think envy is a little muted for being such a powerful emotion. If you think about it, envy in general, the definition of envy, I think she's a little muted, and I think she leeches a little bit too much off of anxiety.
Yeah.
It makes sense in the way that they handle it, but I think envy is probably the one emotion, the new emotion that needs more development.
I felt like every emotion had a chance to shine in this movie, which is incredible to do with the large amount of cast of characters they have here. And even the small minor characters, like there's even a moment, it's my favorite joke in the movie, but they go inside like suppressed memories or locked away.
Yeah, there you go.
And there are some characters in that vault, especially one of them that involves a 2D animated character. I was laughing my ass off in the theater.
He was good. I know exactly who you're talking
but
about.
I do feel like... Go ahead, Dom.
That's when I was afraid, like, oh no, is this going to get too much?
Yeah.
But then how they were able to do it was that they utilized alternative animation styles, and like, this is great. You did something really cool with 2D animation, with video games. You did something with like that. That was really,
Shadows
really
again.
Cool to see. Yeah, absolutely. Like
Pixar and Shadows, man.
You don't see that in from Pixar too often.
Yeah.
Blending the animation styles, and how they did it here was really, really good. And as a certified gamer, that really made me laugh. They got like a YouTuber. They got like a video game YouTuber to voice that dude.
Yeah. And the thing I was gonna say is like envy like is the only one. I mean, like we just mentioned like two other characters that you'll see in this movie that like I felt like they stole the scene in the movie, like when they were there. But envy the whole time, and it sucks because I love AO and I can't wait for the Bear season 3 to start up next week. She does a great job voice acting, but the character I felt like just had nothing to do really, and it's like everybody else had like something to do or a moment to shine that made them stick out, but not really envy. The only other critique I had with this movie is mainly with its second act, and it's not that the second act is bad, but being that you're in the setting of Riley's head, you are retreading a lot of familiar ground, and it's like, okay, we're going to the back of the mind again, and it's just like we're doing this whole thing again, and we need to get back to the control room again before something
Yeah.
bad happens. So it does have a little bit of familiarity, and it was like, damn, I really wish you could have found a way to like redo this. But the longer I thought about it, I mean, like this is a criticism I have, but it's not a big one to bring the movie down because I really thought about it. It's like, I mean, shit, what could you do, man? You're inside of a head. I don't know where else you're gonna go. Where else you're gonna go in the body as these emotions really? Maybe in the third one they'll explore more of that. Maybe they'll do something more creative with the head. I'm hoping to do more things, and this is what I'm hoping if they make a third, and we can go into final thoughts, or unless if you guys have something else to say, play around with those islands a bit more. Because they do tease that Family Island is shrinking, and I'm wondering if that's being led to the third film for something.
That's college, right? That's going
that's
college
probably
again.
college, yeah. Like, you know, you disassociate with your family, you have this disconnect because you're going away and everything, and you're growing up into an adult or something, whatever it may be. I really do want them to play with the idea of those islands more, and maybe the emotions have to go visit those islands and figure out what the hell is happening here with Riley, like, you know, something like that. That would at least give us a new setting compared to like we're just traveling down the mine and like there's these pockets and everything, but going to these islands I think would be definitely that. Other than that though, I can go into final thoughts and whatnot, but if you guys have anything else you want to say.
I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add though, going back to the supporting characters really quick. I think the supporting characters do their job effectively, but nobody and it. Well, I guess anxiety. I definitely think anxiety is probably one of the strongest characters in the whole series. But I will say of the supporting characters, because anxiety is like a main character.
Right,
of the
exactly.
supporting characters, nobody's as good as Bing Bong from the original.
Oh, yeah, man.
Oh God, freaking Bing Bong. Oh God, that
Man, and
that
I
made me cry. I think that made me
revisiting
cry.
that, man, he is the emotional center of that movie.
He is.
He is the emotional center of that movie. One of the best anime. Probably on, if you were to make a top 25 best Pixar characters, he's on the top 25. What he means to the story and what he means in relatability. He's so good. Anyway, Joe, if you want to start us off with final thoughts, I'm all ears.
Yeah, Inside Out 2, it's an excellent reminder of why Pixar reigned supreme for so long. Their ability to approach topics and themes and make them entertaining and engaging for all audiences across all ages was their bread and butter for years. We saw it while growing up. I mean, I was glad to grow up during that golden age of Pixar and making tier lists of Pixars and ranking lists, which was a topic we actually did on Sleepless with Steve.
We did.
Today, though, it's harder for Pixar because now I feel like DreamWorks has really stepped up their game. Sony Animated Pictures and even Disney Animated Studios, which at a time Pixar was just considered to be the animation studio for Disney. But now when you get something like Zootopia, Frozen, Moana, stuff like that Disney can do on their own, it's like, hey, like, you know, there's competition out there that rivals Pixar. Lately, like sometimes some of their films don't stick out as much, like Lightyear or Luca for me. I know some people really like that movie, or even Elemental. I think it's a good movie. It's just, you know, it doesn't stick out as some of Pixar's best. But Inside Out 2 is exactly why we would get excited seeing that little lamp hop across the screen every time a movie started. For me, it is 3.5 out of 4 stars.
I'll go and then I'll leave it for you, Dom. Yeah, this is a message, I think, in this movie that's really difficult to communicate. And Inside Out 2 finds another way to illustrate mental health in a loving and non-judgmental manner that is communicable to kids and very entertaining and very relatable too for adults. I think this is one of those movies too that, like, none of us are parents, but I think like the old joke is that, like, you know, kid sees a movie and wants to watch it, you know, 7, 8 times over and stuff. And Disney Plus makes that easier. I think Inside Out 2 is a movie parents might welcome showing their kids over and over again. I think it's that good. It's really that effective. And also as well, I think it's just a beautifully made movie, structurally, and just the wealth of characters that populate it. So it's 3.5 out of 4 stars for me.
Wow. Yeah. If you really think about what this movie can and has done in the wider discourse, I've known some child therapists that use those characters as like, hey, I use this as an exercise. I ask the kid to fill out a bubble every day, like color. How do you feel? Blue for sadness, you know, yellow for joy, et cetera, et cetera. Stuff like that. I'm like, in the wider discourse, Inside Out may very well be one of Pixar's most important franchise in that specific context, in that purview. And Joe, what you were alluding to earlier about how this could be the next
Toy Story for a generation.
Yeah. really, if you think about it, like, yeah, I totally get it. People are gonna be growing up with this kid, with Riley, you know, a girl that's really, really cool. And for that alone, I think it deserves like a
Yeah.
3.5 out of 4 stars. But how this movie executes that, I'm very, very happy for it. And even at the pace that it was going on, where at times it seemed almost too fast, or the characters seemed almost too much, you sit back and go, man, it's like looking back at the most refined stage production, where it's like, how did this not fall apart? That's incredible. That's so cool. All the things that were falling apart behind the scenes, like South Park, how South Park used to get made in 6 days. Like, how did this become one of the best episodes ever when things were just so slapdash at the last minute? No, a 3.5 out of 4 stars. This was great.